Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Follow us, likes, double tap. Now they control your life. What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome to the 817 podcast. This is being posted today, which would be Memorial Day weekend. So you could be out on a floaty, on some water, drinking some brewskis.
Or maybe it's raining.
Or maybe it's raining based off of what's going on. But we did this the week before because we are also going to be away for Memorial weekend. But yeah, this is actually really exciting. I've been looking forward for this conversation, and it's going to be with Mitch Whitten, Executive Vice President for Marketing and Strategy for Visit Fort Worth, really leading the direction on how tourists and people come to Fort Worth. One, how do we get people here? But then how do we allow them to have a great experience to talk about Fort Worth in a positive way?
I know Mitch from serving on the executive committee of the Fort Worth Film Commission together. He's a really great guy. He is really the one responsible for helping tell Fort Worth's story. So I think that's an idea that we really love and want to get behind. And so we're excited to hear from him on what it looks like to tell the story of Fort Worth nationally.
Yep. So here's Mitch Whitten.
I'm Mitch Whitten, Executive Vice President at Visit Fort Worth, and my Fort Worth story changes every day. There's always something new going on in Fort Worth. There's always something we're learning and new people we're meeting. And it's really been that way since I moved here about 25 years ago. So I think that qualifies me as just beyond newcomer, but really excited to meet so many different people across all the area of Fort Worth. And really, there's something new every day.
You did high school, right? And here? Did you do high school here?
So my brief story came from a city east of here, and high school in Sugar Land near Houston.
Okay.
But my first job was I was a reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. That was my first job out of college, and was wanted to learn about the city, and was fortunate enough to get a job back when people printed out the news and threw it in your yard. And really that whet my appetite for getting to know people here and trying to understand how the city worked and why people wanted to move here and how they wanted to improve the city, and which that conversation's been going on for a long time, hasn't it? And after that, I left the Star-Telegram to work for Pier 1 Imports, and then spent some years marketing a university to the east of here, while commuting. So I love Fort Worth so much. I probably spent about 250,000 miles driving to work over a decade before being fortunate enough to work at Visit Fort Worth.
That's awesome. So for people that don't know, they might see billboards around that have the Visit Fort Worth logo on it. What is Visit Fort Worth? What's the role that it plays?
Visit Fort Worth is a nonprofit that markets the city. We want people to come here to visit and to get a taste for what's going on here. And we do that not only for people coming here for a fun weekend, but also they may come here for a sports event. They may come here to hear music. They may come here to see rodeo. They may come here for a business meeting, which we're seeing return after a year and start up again. So people come for many different reasons. And our main goal is to raise awareness of Fort Worth, to make sure they have a good time when they're here, and to really learn from the visitor and give that feedback to the city as well. But we're all about jobs and economic impact. And the visitor economy is responsible pre-pandemic for about a $2.4 billion economic impact. And that puts a lot of people to work and engages a lot of people in hospitality and a lot of people who, not just hotels and restaurants, but many small businesses. So that's what we're about.
What did Visit Fort Worth look like in a time when we were not allowed to go anywhere this last year? What were y'all's time spent doing and strategizing around shutdowns and just very limited travel last year?
Let me start by saying that Visit Fort Worth has changed even before that. We really used to be about just filling the convention center and encouraging people to have weekend fun. And really over the last 5 years, we've added the Fort Worth Film Commission, Here Fort Worth Music Association, the Fort Worth Sports Commission to bring more big events here. And of course, we operate the cattle drive, and we've added Visita Fort Worth to reach Spanish-speaking audiences. So really, we've really diversified the approach, because the Fort Worth story really depends on who you're talking to and what they're interested in. And so that was really helping drive tourism up, growing tourism, more than 9 million people a year. And of course, last year really halted all that. And we jumped in, and when we knew that things were slowing down, we knew we had communication channels. We knew we had a voice to help augment city messages. And so we created the Y'all Stay Home campaign at first, then followed by the Y'all Wear a Mask campaign. Never thought you'd hear a tourism authority, which is really about people moving around, say Y'all Stay Home. But we created some public health messages, working with the chambers of commerce, working with the mayor's office, and really by last summer started seeing some slight movement when the Charles Schwab Challenge golf tournament without fans took place, and we started taking some baby steps as people started to move around.
I feel like when you ask somebody about like advertising a business, like people have like a baseline understanding of like Instagram ads and TV spots and stuff like that. What does advertising a city look like?
Well, cities are very complex. And so while we spend a lot of time advertising, we also spend a lot of time pre-pandemic bringing in media or customers to experience the city. But I think it'd be incorrect to think that Fort Worth had just one image. So they're very complex, and they're always changing. So, as some might say, when will the business of creating Fort Worth be finished? And the answer really is never, because it's ever changing, not just with new people moving in, but taste changing, new businesses, new goals and aspirations. So we really try to give voice to a number of different things that might appeal to visitors, whether it's the new cool restaurant in the historic South Side or the big development in the Stockyard. So it's certainly a mixture of social media, traditional advertising, blogs, and all those kind of things that can help give voice to a lot of the different things going on here. I like to step back and say, I like to talk about the last song in the musical Hamilton. And that song is Who Tells Your Story? And I think that's important, because it's not me making up the story. We're here to give voice and put a spotlight on all the cool people doing really interesting things here, who are investing their savings and their livelihood in new business and cool restaurants and attractions that really draw here. It's the energy of the locals, I think, that really drives our visitor economy.
Yeah. Well, how do you see the story of Fort Worth being told since you're kind of 25 years being here? Like, I don't know what population was then, but it at least doubled. But so what is your kind of ability to see? I mean, how old is Visit Fort Worth? Was there even a thing like this back then? Were we that proactive? Can you kind of tell that story and how it's kind of changing?
Sure. We're about 55 years old.
Okay.
It really started with the local business community saying we want to invest money largely from hotel revenues to reinvest in getting even more people here to visit. Really, in recent years, as it's grown, like I said, we really started tourism. Really, let me go back even further. Tourism really started, back in the 1870s, 1876, when the first train arrived and people started coming here, and as commerce grew and the economy recovered after the Civil War. I like to focus on the year 1892. In that year, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, famous for coming through Fort Worth, they robbed their first train. So it gives you an idea of what was going on in the Wild West. But in the same year, a group of largely women in the frontier in Fort Worth said, we are going to bring art to the frontier, and we're going to start what became the first museum in Texas, and today is the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth. So I think ever since then, Fort Worth has been both invested in a cowboy culture, but just as important, in bringing art and creativity to the frontier. And so really that story has mushroomed into many other things beyond that, from food tourism to movie tourism to sports tourism and all the things that bring people here today. But we've been at it for a long time.
That's a really interesting perspective to look back then, especially now that we see that Fort Worth's brand that Visit Fort Worth is really getting behind is the modern West. What does it look like to pitch that brand to people when maybe their perspective of Fort Worth is a little more of like the oil tycoon Western type of thing? Mm-hmm. But for those of us that are here, we know about the art scene and the music scene and everything going on. So what does it take to change perspective of that for people?
One of the challenges is always we wanted to create a platform that would allow us to talk to different people about the different aspects of the city. And one of the challenges, I think, even with consumer products and certainly with a city, is how do you introduce people to all the new things, and how do you entice all the people who don't know about Fort Worth, and at the same time bring along the people who have other ideas about what the city is or what the city should be. And I think that, the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of her famous quotes was, try to bring people along. If you're going to enact change, do it in a way that brings people along. And I think that's true. It's been said about soda logos and branding that you have to, how do you bring those who are invested in the nostalgia and who've been with the brand, and then how do you go forward and engage new people in it? And the same is true here. And really it boils down to who are you talking to and what are they interested in? I mean, I think any good marketing it really focuses on who you're talking to. A number of years ago, someone mentioned to me that they had put together a business proposal for someone out of town, and they put a cowboy on the cover. And they said, you know what? That just really didn't resonate. I don't think that's working. And I said, that's true. I don't think I would put that image on the cover of an economic development proposal. And I think but I think that's emblematic of that there is I don't think there is one image that captures Fort Worth. It really depends on who you're talking to, if that makes sense.
I'm always goes to solution minded or figure out ideas. I was I mean, being around for 55 years, I would imagine that maybe this already happened. I was like, man, I feel like Fort Worth needs a commercial where it's some dude walking around, those Saturday night kind of shows. They're walking around the neighborhood, but they don't walk around in the cities of Texas. They walk around Portland, Oakland, Brooklyn, and they're just walking around. And it's how many people live in Fort Worth? And you just ask people and see, I guarantee you're going to get 1,000, you're going to get 10,000, you're going to get all these different, and you're just going to ask them these questions. And then it's no, it's the 13th biggest city. And everyone's like, what? That's crazy. I didn't know that. I think that's I feel the fix that we're looking for. How do we go from our population count when you ask strangers outside of the state of Texas, how big Fort Worth is? I think that's the gap. And I guess, what is your thoughts on how do we solve that gap and tell a national story that shows that Fort Worth is not a suburb of Dallas. It's not an airport city. It has its own space to play and live and be a part of something.
Well, I probably disagree just a little bit with your assessment. And by the way, I heard last week I think we're officially going into slot 12 in terms of largest cities. And we do tell our customers, one convention customer said, I'd love to have our meeting there. It looks amazing, but really, do you have the air service to fly in? And we're like, DFW airport, you can get anywhere. I mean, in a matter of minutes. We have the most, so many, all these domestic connections, international. But EJ, as you have mentioned to me, growth is not the story, and growth is not the brand. I think our best marketing is when we talk about specifics and we really talk about even beyond just entrepreneurship and the cool things happening. I want to see us tell from a business perspective when we are luring conventions here and we're trying to get conventions in medicine, in mobility, in agribusiness, all the things that really can draw on our strengths. Let's talk about the exciting things happening in specific sectors, and let's kind of connect the dots for all the innovation happening at Alliance and the South Side. I want to connect the dots better for the convention customer, because in essence, we really have an innovation trail from north to south and east to west. And I think we could connect the dots better when it comes to that. But the same is true for our other initiatives. I mean, we have not portrayed Fort Worth as a music city trying to be Austin or be Nashville. We really started marketing music in response to what was happening. We don't claim to have the most music venues or the most studios, but there is a real heart and soul here to our music scene. And there has been in the past as well, in a history with artists like Ornette Coleman that's almost lost. And we really, so I think good marketing really reflects true stories about what people are doing, how they're doing it. And people are ultimately attracted to people to come here and check it out.
I think one thing that's interesting that we talk about some is the idea now is more workplaces are going remote. How does Fort Worth pitch itself as, hey, come live here? Especially we do host a number of conventions. I feel like it's almost constant that something's going in and out of the convention center, and obviously picking back up now. How do we get those people that maybe aren't tied to their permanent living situation job wise anymore to say, oh, like, I really liked it here. How do I make this somewhere that I could come live?
I think we have to market Fort Worth as, and we certainly have our challenges. Every city does.
Right.
But I think we have to market Fort Worth. The same reason it's great to visit here is it's great to live here. And that is, it can be easy. It can be easy to get around. It can be easy to connect. It can be, the cultural resources we have here. Not just museums, but art, artist communities, and other creative outlets, resources for entrepreneurs. I think we have to market it as a potentially, for a lot of people, easy place to live, and that it's and compare it to some other places, and that we have the resources here. People want to help you, and the feedback we've gotten from visitors and residents is it can be a supportive community. And like I said, there are always challenges, but I think that I think that it has that appeal that when you visit, it can, people welcome you. Our hospitality, I think, is the best in Texas. And I think that, a lot of people are drawn to that and have moved here. We have seen a number of artists start to move up from Austin because it's affordable to live in Fort Worth. And they found a home here, and they said, I wanted to go find something else. And so we want to increase, awareness of, certainly from a visitor standpoint, but our survey suggests two things. First of all, people who see our ads stay longer, so they're going to experience more parts of the city. But our survey work also suggests that people who visit think more highly about living in Fort Worth. Doesn't mean they all do, but they're more inclined to think about living here than those who don't visit. Yeah. So our job is to get people to try the merchandise.
Mm-hmm. So what are some challenges? You mentioned challenges. What are some challenges that you see? And then I guess if you can give like 2 or 3 challenges, and then I guess what are some opportunities as well?
Well, there are a couple. I mean, I think for us, facilities are always a challenge in terms of, space is our first technology. And do we have the space for people to congregate, to gather, to experience? We have Dickey's Arena is a great new concert venue. We need other, I think we have capacity for a lot more music venues and production studios and things like that. Artists need the space to create and to perform. I think that our convention center is inefficient. It's outdated. It's been called that for decades. And we really hope in the decade ahead to replace that with especially replacing the current arena, the old arena downtown with space that allows small and large conventions to move in and out more freely. Because when you invite people here to convene and discuss things and meet on things, that you really become a city where we're marketing not just buildings, but brains and ideas. And I want to come here to do business. I think obviously one of the challenges we are trying to take on is from a tourism standpoint is making sure as many people as want to be involved are involved in telling the story. So I really think that we call it community-based tourism. And because I really do believe you have to build a brand from the inside out. I think years ago, we talked about that 55-year history. I think years ago, the idea was you really market to people outside the city. But I think that local passion is such a magnet for tourism that we do share our message locally. And we actually ask locals to help us craft the story. We don't have one ad agency. We don't have an ad agency. We employ young filmmakers from across the city to help do videos. We talk to businesses all over the city about what they're up to create blogs. And so I really believe that you have to involve as many people as you can in telling that story. And that work is frankly never done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love, was it the Fort Worth Stories series that was a few years ago? And even wasn't that part of like how Jonathan got linked up to the Gaines also? I feel like I remember reading that there was like some sort of connection seeing that video. But I feel like getting to see stuff like that and see different people highlighted, it just makes you like excited to know what's going on around you, and then see those people and maybe feel like you have a touch point to interact with them in a coffee shop or wherever you run across them in town.
We were fortunate enough several years ago to connect with Warren and Jules Cook at their agency, Make Something Beautiful. And they're great filmmakers. And they had a vision with us for telling some of these individual stories. And Jonathan was one of the first, and Jonathan Morris. And, if you know the story behind Fort Worth Barbershop, and it's been told before, but, he wanted a space where everyone is welcome, and all his barbers have to be able, they can cut anyone's hair, any type of hair. And so everybody's welcome. You don't have to wait on one barber for this or one barber for that. So he did a great interview and talked about in there. He really unscripted. He really nailed it when he said, we, as a visitor destination, we don't have mountains and we don't have an ocean, but we have our people. And people here are creating unique spaces and unique places and a unique vibe. And so that was part of our first season of Fort Worth Stories. You can find it at fortworthstories.com still. And I believe it was used as a pitch video for the Magnolia Network, and we couldn't be prouder of what Jonathan's accomplishing there. And also at Hotel Dryce. This last year, a couple months ago, Travel and Leisure Magazine named us one of the top 50 destinations for 2021. And the Hotel Dryce, as well as the Hotel Drover and the Stockyards, were two of the big reasons they talked about that, because they're examples of people creating new cool things. So, but you're right, it's all connected, and you never know where a story or a video will lead. And I think that the more we can share, I think the more connections we can all make.
I have a more selfish question, I guess. I'm a sports fan. I go to as many of the Vaqueros games as I can. Excited for the lacrosse team, even though I've never watched lacrosse or been a lacrosse fan. Excited to have something to support. What does it look like going and pitching a city for the Bassmaster Classic to come in here, or to a lacrosse franchise? And I personally know that Dallas doesn't have a women's soccer team, and I would love to see women's soccer take off in the US, but especially in Fort Worth. What does that look like, approaching a league and being yeah, we want to be the city for Panther City lacrosse?
Well, I think with a lot of the sports events, there's one thing they have in common when we pitch, whether it's a business convention or a sports coming in here. And that's one of our superpowers that Fort Worth really gets right is often the cooperation people show when trying to get an event here. So for example, Bassmaster Classic is coming in a couple of weeks. And they want to do an event in the Stockyards, and they need space at Dickies and Will Rogers. And what about Trinity Metro and getting people around? And can you recommend restaurants? And when we call and help quarterback, opportunities like that, more often than not, everyone says yes. How can I help? It starts with yes, and let's figure out how to make this work. And so whether it's U.S. Gymnastics coming in, this next weekend with Simone Biles and one of her last appearances ever in this kind of road to the Olympics at Dickies, it takes a lot to get those events here, and from the city, the county, others. It's really one of our superpowers is that collaboration. And our customers tell us that, hey, you made it easy, or there were obstacles to overcome and we figured it out. So for example, with Bassmaster, we have a performer at Billy Bob's that weekend, Jimmy Dale Allen, who's getting a lot of notice. And he also is quite the angler. And so Bass wanted him to play a couple of songs at their festival as well. So we talked to Billy Bob's, and that worked out really well. And everybody figured out how to make it work. And for him to be featured artist at Bass as well as Billy Bob's. And but there are hundreds and thousands of examples like that when you're trying to get people to come to town.
Yeah, I know it's the same with the film commission. Obviously, like hosting film crews is no small feat. And getting, back-to-back years of feature releases that were done in Fort Worth. And then even little things like, I know, pickup shots for the Green Knight, which finding a place to look like, I believe most of their filming was done in Ireland. So like coordinating area in North Texas to look like that, I think is no small feat either. But I feel like, people don't recognize the amount of jobs that come out of stuff like that. Even simple things like Brooke and I hosted two members of the film crew of Miss Juneteenth while they were filming here because they're coming in from out of town. So even small things from people like renting out rooms to catering that happens every single day. Talk some about everything that goes into having movie productions and music production come in to the city, and where the fingers of that spread into the community.
Well, it's a huge undertaking. And first, let me say, Jimmy, thank you for creating the Granbury Theater. It's a great story and it's a great place. And we've had some events there. And I just think that you're investing in that is part of the story, and saying that Fort Worth values film and values art films and creative spaces like yours. So thank you for that. Thanks. It's a big part of the story. It really is. Films are very complicated, and it's very hard to go to any city and say, can we shut down a street for a day? Can we shut down the street for a week? And, we try to say yes, because all these people are connected. You work with a producer on a Chevy commercial, and your ability to let them film for a few minutes on the 7th Street Bridge because the city trusted us that we would minimize the impact. That producer may be working on a feature film, next week or next month. And so, and it's funny, you mentioned the Green Knight, David Lowery's new project. David Lowery first worked here on Ghost Story. That filmed in other cities as well. But he said, I need a construction pit where a skyscraper is about to go up, but I really need it empty. And Frost Tower was under construction at the time. We said, David, you can film here. And so he filmed that kind of a famous scene from that indie film. And then he came back and he filmed Old Man and the Gun, one of Robert Redford's last films. And he filmed a lot of scenes here for that. And then he's made other connections for us to his friends. Miss Juneteenth, we couldn't be prouder of what Channing Godfrey Peoples, her project, winning so many awards and so many notices. And now we have even more films coming up for Tribeca Film Festival. We really, what started with a very small effort with the Film Commission has had a more than $50 million impact in its first 5 years. And now we're into year 6. And, this next week we'll have the world premiere. I can't remember the last time we had a world premiere here of this caliber, world premiere of 12 Mighty Orphans.
Yeah.
And it just, a lot of movies like The Green Knight take place in other cities and countries, but here's a Fort Worth story. Mm-hmm. Robert Duvall, Luke Wilson, Martin Sheen, and they shot here. And what it really takes is it requires a lot of people to say yes. The school district said yes to letting us shoot at Farrington Field. The Parks Department let us take over some acres in Gateway Park, and so the Masonic Temple downtown. And we'll have some film shorts coming out in the next week showing some of those locations, and really the directors and producers who now want to come back saying, wow, this is why it was so great to shoot here in Fort Worth, because people said, yes, how can I help?
Yeah, I ran into Emilio Estevez in Kraftwerk one day because he was living here with his dad while they were shooting the movie. And I turned around. I was like, what? Why is Emilio Estevez behind me? Is that really him? But that's what happens when movies come to town is you get this spread throughout the community of that's just an exciting thing to see somebody of that fame right behind you, just hanging out in Fort Worth.
Well, and I probably shouldn't say this, but his mom just called and literally asked our film commissioner if he could come to the premiere. His dad is not going to be able to make it, although he just did an interview with the Star Telegram about the movie. But he said, could he make it? He's a late addition. So, that's special to us because, we talk a lot about the millions of people who see our ads or how, the big numbers of economic impact. But we also want people who have a voice to come here and experience the city and share it with their friends. I mean, ultimately, that's the best advertising, when people come here and have a good time. And now he wants to come back. We have the investors in the film are coming. Some executives with Sony Pictures Classics are coming. So really, people are so behind this film, and I'm excited about it. It's the Cowgirl Museum got excited about it because Luke Wilson's mom, Laura Wilson, famous photographer, especially of the West, took a lot of behind the scenes photography. So now there's going to be an exhibit with her photography opening at the Cowgirl on June 18th. Really timed with the movie. Her son starred in the movie, and she's an inductee in the Cowgirl Hall of Fame for her work photographing the West. And so a lot of the community's gotten behind projects like this. And I think that's one of those things where when you do something special like that, it's really not all about us. We want to create things and bring opportunity that everybody can get involved in. So you're right. It's fun to have folks like that, like Emilio Estevez and his friends come, and I know they'll have a good time here.
Yeah. I think what I feel like where I'm excited, I feel like the 817 podcast is oftentimes where the paranoid people hang out in Fort Worth, and we talk about all the worst things possible that could happen. And so I think that's kind of the fear of Fort Worth, in the sense of, Bill Gates once said, the greatest CEOs are CEOs who are always paranoid, and they're always thinking about the worst case scenario, or how can they get better? And I feel that fear that Fort Worth has no paranoia. I feel like we think this kind of everything's great. And so I've been to 48 states in my career doing what I do, speaking to 500,000 people. And, I'm pretty confident if I, put up a survey and said Miami, New Orleans, Nashville, Atlanta, Fort Worth, and we told 100 people to go pick which one's the biggest city, the right answer won't get picked most of the time. And so I know we talked about this, Fort Worth's the 12th biggest city, but traveling I thought Fort Worth was a suburb. Oh, I thought Fort Worth was this. Oh, I didn't know it was that big. It's constant in my travel. And I really feel like there's that gap. If you're not paranoid about that, what would you be paranoid of?
Well, I'll put a spin on that. I know Gates said that. I will say a couple of years ago, the New York Times, they have a CEO column called The Corner Office, and they interview all types of CEOs. And they looked back and they went back and found, like, what is the common thread among all the CEOs we've interviewed, and the number one trait that really drives them. And it's a little bit different spin than paranoia, but it's related, and that is curiosity. And that every day the highest performing CEOs got up and said, there's something I don't know. There's something I need to learn. And they had that open outlook. And so I have two things I'm most curious about that drives me. And maybe you could call it paranoia, because we should be looking out for what are we not doing. But I'm curious about people I don't know and people I haven't met, that I have got to get out there and spend time learning about our city every day, and who is not included in the story that needs to be. The second thing I'd say is then how do we share that story with more people? So one is kind of the intake, and one is the output. And how do we get the word out? What levers can we pull to spread the word to the most people? Let me go back to the first one. The story's been shared before, but we had it when we were starting here, Fort Worth. There was a town hall, and we had our first town hall. We were so proud of ourselves. We had about 125 people show up. The Texas Music Commissioner was there, and we took questions after a presentation. And toward the end, this one hand went up in the back, and this guy asked me as I was speaking at the time, and he said, "What are you doing for hip hop?" And I was so flat-footed, and I said, "Absolutely nothing. Will you help us? Will you sit down and talk to us?" And ever since then, Lou Charles has become a friend of ours and a friend to me personally. And people who are willing to sit down and teach you about their craft, and to teach you about the world in a way you didn't know. And that happens all the time. We have years ago at Visit Fort Worth, we really focused on what was called the tourism triangle: the stockyards, downtown, and the cultural district. And those are still really big reasons people come to visit. But we didn't have the historic South Side on our map. And so how can you feel good about representing the city if you don't have, if you're not representing all the opportunity? We don't put every residential neighborhood on the visitor map. The goal is not to drive people into and down residential streets. But we're working with neighborhood associations where they do have business opportunities. And they do have restaurants or museums or galleries or murals. The mural tour that we put up is allowed us to showcase more districts around the city than ever before. So I really, coming back to sharing the story, I really want to make sure that community-based tourism is our approach, and that we are including more and more people in telling the story. But and let me just add, that takes work. And I think that it's easy to talk about that, but the hard work really is going out and spending time with people. And I've had the opportunity to do that with each of you. And, but that's the hard work, I think, of getting to know your community. It takes time.
If somebody feels like they have a Fort Worth story that is not being told right now, what's the best way for them to contact Visit Fort Worth and feel like they're having their voice be heard for the city?
So email me at mitchwhitten@fortworth.com. It's MITCHWHITTEN as in Nancy @fortworth.com. We want to hear from you. And, I don't want people to feel like, well, I'm not sure I fit the mold of what they're looking for. It's funny. I think I don't think there is necessarily one look for Fort Worth. Recently, someone shared with me that someone thought that I didn't care much about our cowboy heritage. And although I recently spoke at Billy Bob's 40th anniversary with my hat and boots on, but then another person has told me that we do too much, give too much credence to that Western heritage. So it's probably a good place to be if people think that if some people think you're too much of this and others too much of that, because really everybody has their own story, and there really is no I take issue a little bit with cowboys and culture, because that just kind of reduces it down to there's you and you. Mm-hmm. And I think that cities are dynamic, much more complex. It's not like marketing a single product. This is we have more than 900,000 people here, as you like to talk about. And those are a lot of stories, and everybody has their own Fort Worth. And, we need to work harder in engaging, the northern parts of Fort Worth as well. We've talked about some of the other neighborhoods in Fort Worth. You go to North Fort Worth and all the cool innovation and corporate development happening there. And we need to remind them they're part of our city too. They stay in our hotels. They're visitors as well. And as we learned during COVID, locals are visitors too. Mm. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think I realized this week, it kind of hit me that, I don't know enough of the, Asian American Pacific Islander community that is here in Fort Worth. We ate at Kintaro Ramen, and then last night we ate at Over Here, which is the Filipino food truck. And I was just they're the community for them is here. They live here, they're investing in this city, and I don't know that well enough. And I feel like that's just like the constant evolution of a city like Fort Worth is how do you dive in further to those communities? So I really hope somebody listens and reaches out to you and says, hey, I have a story that I don't think is being told.
We're on the same track, Jimmy. We recently have engaged some cultural experts to help learn more about the Asian communities, plural, and the nuances between, how can we converse more fluently in Thai culture versus Laotian versus, we have a number of different temples here and faiths that actually draw visitors here. How do we, sometimes it just starts with, do we even know what we're talking about? Are we talking, do we know what a Laotian temple is versus Thai, and then what are the different cultures that really make up our Asian community? So we're not talking monolithically. So that's part of that time investment. We think it's important to seek out people who know. As you know, we spent the last couple of years really trying to do a deeper dive and really enhance our engagement with Fort Worth's Black community in terms of what are all the different stories? How do we? Why isn't Evans Avenue Plaza on our map? What is the history? And as you know, you hosted a premiere of some videos and films we did, both about the past and the future. So it's really and those lessons are complex and take a lot of time, and thankfully there are a lot of people here willing to teach us. So I'm glad you highlighted the Asian community, because it's something we're trying to spend more time on.
I know you're passionate about education as well. So a big part of Fort Worth, right? If we're going to get people, all right, I come here for a business trip. I did my thing. It's a pretty cool place. Drove around, saw what I could get for a house. Public schools, the school ecosystem of Fort Worth is going to be important to keep businesses here. How does education fit into the story? And if it seems like, especially with this mayoral race, and a lot of Betsy's work was around helping there. What is your take on improving our schools in the story as well?
Well, let me just speak. This is really out of my tourism lane, and I'll just speak as a parent in Fort Worth ISD. I have two boys. One is graduating from Pascal High School. The other one will start Pascal High School next year. And, I've seen firsthand how important, our neighborhood schools are, and especially reading and literacy. My wife, Kristen, was the founding executive director of Read Fort Worth. And it just takes a parent time when you read to kids in school, and you see, just as a volunteer reader, and seeing a child I started with in elementary school in third grade, how he read with me at the beginning of a school year versus the end. And you see just that incremental progress. And it's, we all I think have to give time and, toward these efforts, whether you're an advocate for in front of the school board, whether you are just volunteering on the daily basis, as so many people do. They're really just warriors on the front line of volunteering to help kids at school. And because teachers and administrators, they need that volunteer help to make our schools run. And so whatever role you play, being involved in the community is paramount. And so I just know that, my wife and I spend time not only with our kids, but volunteering and trying to do anything we can to make our community better. I mean, I think that, at the end of the day, one of the reasons we drive tourism to Fort Worth with that hat on is visitors come here and invest in our community. And that money that investment returns dividends in people who come here and spend money, and that supports small business. And hopefully that supports, 3/4 of hospitality businesses are small businesses. And hopefully that economic impact and that job creation helps people and improves the quality of life here and helps Fort Worth build institutions, creative institutions, business institutions that help people. And so ultimately we're all in this to make our community better. I think that's really a big point I want to make, is that different organizations here, we all have our lanes and we all have our mission statements, but I think we all have kind of a secret mission statement, and that's it's unwritten. We want to make Fort Worth better. And whether you work in the education space or the tourism space or the economic development space, I think that's something we all have in common. And I think y'all do too with this podcast. I think that underlies all your conversations, is that people come from, whether you're running for elected office or whether you're analyzing the city or whether you're on the front lines, it's about, we all want to make Fort Worth better. So I hope that answers your question, EJ.
Yeah. I think that's a great spot to end too.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for your time doing this and taking time on Sunday morning to talk to us. I know I'm excited for all the 12 Mighty Orphans events coming up, and we'll hopefully be able to make a couple of them. So we really appreciate it, and we appreciate what you've done for the city in this role over the last 7 or 8 years, but in all your time being here.
Well, I'll just end by saying it's a big month ahead, whereas we start June, a lot of sports, got the big movie, and then in the middle of the month, we have Juneteenth and Opal Lee's 2.5 mile walk, starting at Evans Plaza in the historic South Side and going downtown. So listen, thank y'all for this podcast and not only having me on, but just the conversations you create. It's been an honor.
That was Mitch Whitten, Executive Vice President of Visit Fort Worth. And he's such a nice, open and welcoming person. I love any time that I get to interact with him.
Yeah. And very smart. Very smart. This is my only second time connecting with him, but that is for sure there. So it's good to have someone as talented as him thinking about Fort Worth.
Yeah. Do you have any takeaways from anything he said?
Yeah, I mean, I think he mentioned a stat there that I wonder if that's a good thing, or I mean, nothing's good or bad. Everything's we have to manage who we want to be, right? And we all have traits, and you can't just have positive traits.
Yeah.
So, he mentioned how 3 of every 4 small business is linked to tourism. Did I hear that right? Hospitality, right? That he kind of said that at the very end, right?
3 out of every 4 hospitality businesses is a small business.
Gotcha. So I guess that's a good thing. So I thought that was interesting. I didn't know that stat. So I think that's very meaningful when you think about how that shapes our city, right? Because I wonder because I was going in, I wonder what percentage of our small businesses is tied to tourism. Because I think the scary thing about, not the scary thing, but the thing that I think about tourism and a place you want to live is there's a lot of tourism cities that people necessarily don't want to live, but their city is made, right? I mean, Las Vegas is a great example.
Yeah.
Orlando, There's a lot of cities where New Orleans, where it's great to visit, but I don't know necessarily it's a city where I see as a place to live. So I think those are interesting to see of like, how does Fort Worth grow into that space?
Well, and I think that's an interesting gap and opportunity for Fort Worth to potentially bridge is he talked about the triangle, right? Like the cultural district, downtown, and the stockyards being for a long time, maybe like the main attractor of people coming in. And now we have these other really vibrant, great areas that are developing or have developed or have always been there. And it's how do we bring them into the picture also? And so I think maybe the question is of the quarter of businesses of the quarter of hospitality businesses that are not small businesses, either chains owned by, whoever, what percent of the businesses that tourism goes to is that 25% of businesses,
like economic dollars,
right, versus the 75%. And I think that's what they're trying to do a lot of is figure out the way to bring everybody along with Fort Worth tourism. And I think that's, as he was saying, how we market the city depends on who you're talking to. And I think maybe for a long time, the people that Fort Worth was talking to were more interested in like the stockyards kind of area. But now that group is growing and Fort Worth does and still has more opportunity to tell the story of the other places that will attract a different type of tourist.
Yeah. No, when I had the opportunity he invited me to speak to the marketing team. I kind of told him how I preferred Funky Town as the city. And really like, I kind of made a map and I was like, I feel like Cowtown is stockyards. Modern West is like the cultural center. And then like Panther City is like South Main and like West Magnolia. So I feel like they're all good representations of areas, but I felt like Funky Town showcase like what he says, like we don't have one story, but we're an inviting place. Jonathan Morris, it's the people. Yeah. And so that's kind of what I shared. But I mean, I thought it was great. And I mean, it's exciting to live here. I'm still interested to see that, he does about the whole Fort Worth population thing. I think that's a legit story. I wonder where you kind of fill in that spot. Like, I just feel like no one knows how big Fort Worth is or how influential it can be. And our story is very, it's not that it's a bad story. It's just a story that people don't know across the country. Yeah.
No, I mean, I agreed with that. I really hope that people got something out of this conversation, a little peek behind the curtain of what it looks like to bring in so many like dynamic events. I'm to anybody who will listen, I'm always going to bring up that Fort Worth should be pitching to get the next National Women's Soccer League team, at least to snag it before Dallas does. Because I think that's just a lot of the major sports kind of hold their cities hostage, and that like maybe isn't the best relationship, but something like women's soccer, I think, could provide like a really cool thing to the city. So I'm always going to ask that question to anybody who has any sort of knowledge of Fort Worth Sport Commission. But we really love talking to Mitch. I hope you got something out of this conversation. And if you feel like your story isn't being told, Mitch is genuine about reaching out to him. That's not a pandering thing. Please do, because I know that they would love to sit down with you, hear you out, and be able to tell your story too.